Welcome, everyone. We're delighted you're able to join us for today's town hall, URU Town Hall. I'm Steve Dandino. I serve as Executive Director of the Association for Undergraduate Education at Research Universities, which we abbreviate URU. I'm also Associate Provost at Colorado State University, which has hosted URU since 2013. We're in our 25th year as an organization, obviously dedicated to innovation, excellence in undergraduate education, specifically at research universities. And as I'm sure everyone who works in higher ed knows, there's just a great deal of attention these days to career readiness. I suppose it no doubt has a lot to do with the declining public confidence in higher education, and this is seen as a way to bolster our value proposition in the eyes of students and their families, their communities, to double down on the importance of career readiness in our curriculum. At URU, we've often leaned on Cathy Davidson's notion of world readiness, which she meant as a concept to help us think about the integration of liberal arts and science education and career readiness, not as opposing concepts or practices, but as integrated in our curriculum and as part and parcel of our undergraduate experience. So we're just delighted to welcome everyone today to this recorded 1-hour town hall that is entitled Career Readiness in Ohio and brought to you jointly by URU and Podium Education, which is serving as our Boyer Circle Partner this year. And we're really delighted to have Podium with us today. And they work with a lot of the folks you're going to hear from momentarily. We're doing a deep dive in Ohio because it is, like many states and many areas of the U.S., a place where there's a pretty focused attention on this issue of career readiness. And as we offered in our preliminary information, Governor DeWine of Ohio, in his most recent State of the State address, spoke about his desire, from his point of view as the governor, to require Ohio State colleges and universities to implement meaningful work-based learning programs such as co-op internship and externship programs, unquote. And this, of course, impacts directly public institutions, but indirectly also private universities, which also have an interest and always have in career readiness, career preparation, but may be affected indirectly, as I say, by important initiatives like this one. Well, our modus operandi today is to save some time for Q&A. So please use the Q&A tool as part of this Zoom broadcast. Remember, we're being recorded. You can use chat if you'd like for that reason. And if you'd like to articulate your question, pose it verbally, please raise your hand. We have a lot of folks who are joining us, and that will help us identify who would like to speak. So without further ado, we have a series of panelists who are going to introduce themselves and address in a short, punchy way, 2 questions that we've posed to them. And then we're going to circle back to our podium partners. Aled Owen's going to speak on their behalf. And then we'll open it up, as I say, to additional Q&A, beginning with colleagues in Ohio who have joined us and have different perspectives on this statewide initiative. So without further ado, you've seen, I think, from our promotional material that we're joined by John Jewell at Kent State University, Norman Jones at The Ohio State University, Peter Schulman from Case Western Reserve University, and Brian Smith from the University of Cincinnati. And we'll first kick things over to John to address those 2 questions, which are, and I'll read them for everyone's benefit. How is your institution responding to the governor's proclamation? And what opportunities and challenges are you seeing in your approach to world readiness? So thanks so much for joining us, John Jewell, Kent State University.
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve. Hi, everyone. John Jewell. I'm our Associate Dean in our university college, and our career services folks report up through me. And we've been in a lot of conversation about what's going on in the state of Ohio. Just to add one more piece of information for folks, in addition to what Steve added, the governor also indicated that part of our state subsidy of instruction will have as part of the formula, how we are graduating students and the jobs they have after graduation. So that's another significant piece of the conversation. So at Kent State, I think it's an interesting and exciting time for us as an institution, just like the other state institutions. We've really started to do a deep dive into all of the types of experiences that we would consider work-based learning experiences currently going on at the institution. So, traditional internships, co-ops, externships, but also we've partnered with Podium Education, our friends there, to really think about new and different ways to provide work-based learning experiences, really for things that our students wouldn't have access to. Um, so right now, we're waiting for the state to give us final definitions and information about what they're considering work-based learning experiences and the definitions of those. Um, we've had interactions with Ohio Department of Higher Education. They have a working group devoted to this. So we're hoping that come January 2nd, we'll have some information to help guide us all. For the second question, the opportunities and challenges, I really think it's an opportunity for us to think differently about how students are doing this work. Um, and what I mean by that is a traditional internship, you go somewhere, whether it's a whole week over a summer, every week for 10 weeks, whether it's a student employment opportunity on campus that we haven't considered an internship, but it's tied directly to a student's major. And then new partnerships, like I said, with folks like Podium Education. I think some of our challenges are really going to be in the logistics of all this, tracking those experiences. So many of you probably have a system where a student can sign up for an internship, and it doesn't have a lot of rich information about what that was as an internship, maybe not even where it was. And then other types of experiences that might not fall into that registered course type of experience that they would do. Um, and then lastly, I think, again, really thinking differently about how we're serving our high need students and first gen students who may not have access. A few years ago, we started a fund at Kent State University really as a startup award. So for students who are doing internships and were high need, if they needed to go somewhere, there would be some money to help. So just different ways of thinking that we might not necessarily be used to um, in the higher ed space where we've been.
Thanks, John. Let's turn things over to Norman Jones, who's a member of URU's board and the host of our next UVP meeting in June of 2026.
Thanks so much, Steve, and thanks, John. I'm grateful to be part of this. I think all my Ohio colleagues will join me in agreeing that this is not new for our governor to say workforce development is a high priority. So I'm sure all of us have been working on this for years. Our current Senator John Husted, when he was lieutenant governor, had this as a major priority for him. So we worked closely with him for a long time. Some of the things we've been doing over that time period has been developing new degrees. Believe it or not, I'm an English professor who developed an engineering technology program, a whole new degree at Ohio State around workforce development. We've developed a much more robust kind of certificate program so that we could make sure that we were offering opportunities to students appropriately for workforce needs. We've been increasing internships, other forms of experiential learning. Really grateful for Podium. I'll tell you, in consonance with what John just mentioned, for some of our students for whom financially it's not easy to access internships, we found that Podium is a great way for students to get that real internship experience, but in a way that is credit bearing. It fits in with their cost of attendance. We have some students that we have academic enrichment money for, and they can't always use it because if they're bumping up against that cost of attendance with their total financial aid package, that presents difficulties for us. But because the podium opportunities are built into the curriculum, we can count that as a way to increase their cost of attendance, which helps us spend more money on those students. So really grateful for that kind of solution. So there's been a lot going on. There's some programs where we require as many as 3 internships for students to graduate. I completely agree with John, though, that this is also an opportunity, to continue to innovate. So we are looking at tracking what we do more. There are big programs here where we don't require internships, but almost all of our students do. Internships or other forms of work-based experiential learning. We got to track that better. We haven't been tracking it as closely as we'd like. We probably won't require that. All students to do exactly the same kind of thing. We don't think one size fits all is always the best, although there are some programs where we do that. And then trying to create more opportunities for students to engage. I'll end on this a kind of two-part piece. I'm an English professor, right? So I like workforce development, but Steve, I liked what you said about liberal arts and sciences being, we don't want to give short shrift to our educational mission. We're not, workforce training, we are education. But career success is such a great motivator and career preparation for students that I don't see this as a tension. I see it something where, a way in which we can really energize our students, help their parents understand better, what kind of work we're trying to do with them. And a lot of that, as John said, about even say on-campus jobs, it has to do with the level of reflection that students are engaged in. So we have all our students now at the undergraduate level engaged in a kind of portfolio reflection about their experiences throughout the undergraduate career. We're really hoping to expand that to focus on some workforce readiness, career development pieces. We've got a bit of that. We'd really like to do more, but we've got a structure in place. So I'm excited about continuing to innovate, and I'd love to learn from other people because I really don't think there's a one size fits all. But thanks so much.
Thanks, Norman. Let's go now to Peter Schulman at Case Western.
Hi, everybody. It's really nice to be here today. Right. So we, as a private institution, are not subject to the new law and kind of policy provisions. But I think the work we've been doing here over many years is very much resonant with this. Like we do care very much about work-based experiences for our students and helping them bridge into their kind of longer life goals. And I think it's really reflective of our particular kind of demographics of the student body, which is a very kind of pre-professional directed set of students. So every class we have here, we've got a huge number of engineering students, most of whom are looking to have kind of long-term careers in whichever area of engineering they're pursuing. We have an enormous percentage of our students who are in various pre-health fields. Pre-med is huge, but other pre-health fields as well. We have a very strong nursing program. And we have a school of management where our students are looking to go right into all sorts of kind of business and related careers. And they're very interested in kind of work-based opportunities while they're still students. So we've long had, and I think are growing, programs of co-ops, internships, practicum, and other discipline-based curricula that are appropriate for different students. So our nursing students, for example, they're in the clinic their first semester, right? That is just part of their training to be nurses here, and that carries with them throughout their time. Our engineering students, the strong majority of them are doing either summer internships or our co-op program, which is over 2 terms, usually a spring and a summer and a fall, where they're working with a company doing engineering work. So this is all kind of very much integrated. Our pre-health students, they're volunteering at one of the several local, very large hospital networks that are basically adjacent to the campus. So students are doing that. One thing that we've done, and I see this is where it kind of gets into the challenges and opportunities, we rolled out a new general education curriculum a little over 2 years ago that took many years of development and consensus building among the faculty. And one of the provisions of it is that all students have to do some amount of local or global engagement. And when this was written, it was meant to be very capacious. Like we're trying to capture many things that students already do and recognize that on the transcript, or recognize that as part of the general education as a kind of a core value of the institution, of the undergraduate programs here. So it ended up being pretty easy for the transcriptable things, for the co-ops, the practicums, right? Students register for them, they're satisfying the requirement, that's easy. For students who are doing internships that are their own kind of bespoke thing that they develop, those get approved because they have to, those go through our dean's office in engineering. But we have to kind of come up with a way to make sure we're getting that to count for the students' general education requirements. And as we have students who are doing all sorts of unusual, unique things based on whatever their particular interests are, well, we've had to kind of, over the past, 2.5 years, kind of build up ways of, yeah, that should be counting. We want to recognize that that kind of program, that kind of connection with a business, a nonprofit, whatever it is that they end up doing. So we spend a lot of time working on that on the back end to try to make it as seamless for students as possible. But I'm pleased that for us, that it's a really core part of most of our students' experiences now.
Steve, I think you were muted there.
Oh, I was muted. Oh, I'm so sorry. Thanks, Peter. Really appreciate that. Now we're transitioning to Brian Smith, University of Cincinnati.
Hey, howdy. I noticed we all brought our glasses today, except for Mr. Owens. Owen, hopefully yours are on your desk, easily available. Let's see. Okay, so University of Cincinnati has been doing this, or at least co-op, like in principle. And my apologies to Northeastern if you're on the call. I know we have maybe kind of a bit of a Wright brothers case where flight came from. We're going to say we did ours, I think, around 1906. It's almost unfathomable that we only started looking to suffuse some of what we know works well around co-op in around 2017, 2016, with the introduction of career education outcomes as a foundational part of our general education core. And as Ohio's moved to OT 36, we've tried to retain those. What those are meant to promise are touch points over our baccalaureate competencies, so our first year, a mid-collegiate, and a capstone that also ensconce career educational or forward-looking career ed or job readiness outcomes that, in principle, all of our units and departments, disciplines that operate outside of a traditional co-op model we're meant to kind of integrate, infuse, and have live alongside the curriculum or within it, honestly. I'm not going to say that failed. I think one of our larger strategic initiatives, Co-op 2.0, meant to kind of provide an elaboration of, again, what worked well within co-op in order to lean on the strengths of career ed outcomes. I'll just segue directly to challenges. I mean, some of our chief challenges, I think, have been trying to unyoke what co-op is and move it closer to the practices that it embodies and the practices that it embodies within the classroom. So Steve, you were mentioning earlier in our pre-talk, Cathy Davidson sort of premise that all these things should be kind of glommed back together. Like I've English major and English as well. And I think about kind of the Tatler newspaper where basically all subjects were glommed together. There was no separation yet. And so we've just started, and I think we're in the developmental phases of a newer initiative that's meant to underscore, I think, habits of mind and key competencies that we'd like to see live within the curriculum that do have translational value to workplace or career readiness. So things like, and these will seem old hat, and I think they're fairly simple. I think we're just now starting to figure out, I think, how to communicate them potentially in a way that faculty value and can see as strengths within their existing disciplines or areas of growth that are necessary. So we're just talking about things like growth mindset, like providing opportunities for metacognition and metacognitive tasks and reflection that more have to do with students focusing around the translatability of skills that they're developing. Some of our professional schools have been incredibly helpful when we ask them about some of the gaps that they see in preparedness or readiness for students. And a lot of what a number of them mention, even in the professional fields, is a sort of lack of integration or a time spent basically mapping skills onto particular applications for which they might not seem readily available or apparent. I have a colleague here too, Annie Straka, who's been working alongside our multidisciplinary programs in arts and sciences. So we've kind of tackled this in both ways. Like one as a structural element that's meant to live within the curriculum that I would say met cultural resistance and ended up being carried out sort of by, not by adjuncts, but like as a supplement within some of the curriculum. So we've been trying to work hard to re-embed those experiences and not just call them co-op, but have them reflect co-op in quality and I'll say some of the equity of the experiences students are going through. Annie's helped develop a number of the co-ops in some of our social science and liberal arts sections. And we recently launched a Bachelor of Professional Studies degree that relies on PLA to acknowledge workforce experience or any sort of disciplinary experience to be able to grant folks an affordable, sort of flexible route to a bachelor's degree.
Thanks, Brian. This has been just terrific. What a great deep dive and a Tatler reference. That was extra and unexpected. Very wonderful. Appreciate it. Now we'd like to transition to invite Debbie Jackson from Cleveland State University to comment from their perspective as another Ohio institution facing similar, government mandates and student needs. Thanks, Debbie. Really appreciate your joining us today.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. And thank you to all the folks who spoke so far. My name is Debbie Jackson. I serve as Vice Provost of Instructional Excellence at Cleveland State University. And along with my other Ohio colleagues, we've been engaged in this work for quite some time. Just to follow up on a couple of points that have been made and provide some Cleveland context for those things. Peter, one of the things that you mentioned was expanding pre-professional, what happens in a pre-professional degree, right? I come from teacher ed. In teacher education, they're out in schools 8 semesters doing stuff in the schools, and it makes sense. Nurses, same thing. Engineers have had co-op and internships available to them for a long time. So one of the things we're concentrating now on is getting those learning from the pre-professional programs and mapping that onto degrees that may not have the career as seamlessly tied to it, right? If I get a degree in education, I'm going to be a teacher, or I'm not going to be a teacher. I'm going to do something else with that degree related to training. But some of the other degrees, the path from degree to career is not as specific. So it makes the challenge there is in providing the work-based learning experience that makes sense for that degree. I think that's critically important, though, because there is some research in computer science, and there may be research in other areas. Computer science education is what I've been working on the past couple of years. But with some of those STEM degrees, providing an internship or a co-op provides the student the opportunity to see what will happen in their career and stay when it gets hard, right? When I'm in that Calculus 3 class, like, I could just quit or I could keep going. They can refer back to the experience they had in a work-based learning experience, and that's likely to help them continue on. So we're working on that. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention in line, Brian, with what you said was tying these things to the curriculum in real ways, right? One of our goals at Cleveland State is to have students work at work and get credit for that in their degree plan, not as an elective, right? So we're looking at credit for prior learning because this is all related to that as well. We're using military credit as kind of a way to do this. Military credit has it figured out, right? The folks who have been in the military come with a transcript to CSU that says what those whatever meetings and workshops they did in the military, how those translate to the university. So what we're working on is a way to say, okay, if you've been a manager at Bath and Body Works or someplace, right? Or if you're doing an internship at some place, what are the knowledge and skills you're likely to get from that experience? How can you show us that we got them? You got them. And then that counts as a course, right? So we're at the very beginning stages of that. So I don't have a lot of experience to say what worked or didn't work or how it's going even. But we're starting to work with faculty on that to say, I'm from education, kids, everybody comes to an experience knowing some stuff, right? So how do we figure out what they know and then give them credit where it makes sense to do so?
Thank you, Debbie. Really appreciate that.
You're
I was
welcome.
at the University of Dayton for 13 years. I'd like to make a shout out to any of Ohio colleagues from other colleges and universities who'd like to chime in. Would anyone like to add a perspective? You are in the heart of it all. I'm not going to call anyone out, Sarah, so don't worry.
I'll just say one of the things that I think is
Please.
interesting about Ohio is it's not just the appropriate interest in what will help students, but I think there's an interest in keeping graduates in Ohio. And I'm sure there are other states that that think about this sort of thing, but I think we think about that a lot, and it's not something we necessarily at at Case Western Reserve need the governor to encourage us to do. We have our own incentives of wanting to support our community, support Cleveland, our many partners in this big community. We would love to see our graduates stay around, joining businesses, starting businesses, whatever career paths they're looking to do, that has kind of bigger benefits collectively.
Any other thoughts from the panelists? Yeah, it raises the question, Peter, why I left Ohio. I was forced out. They led me to the border and they sort of showed me the door. They said, get across that bridge. That's the only reason one would leave.
But you haven't forgotten the heart of it all.
It's the heart of it all. We all know that.
I would just add that in my position, one of my responsibilities is to monitor the flow of students into our various degree programs and look for where there are log jams and opportunities. I see this as, I mean, it's not easy for us, but an opportunity as well to help with that. We have so many students who are really interested, or their families are pushing them to be interested in what they think are the majors that are going to lead to great career success. And it's 5 or 6 majors at a university that has more than 200 majors when it's Ohio State. And I think we're all in the same kind of situation, no matter how many majors you offer. There are some that are super popular and the rest have a fair amount of capacity. I think helping students see how a wide variety of majors can lead them toward on a career path that could be successful and start talking about that even in their first year. It helps with that kind of issue that plagues us as well. So I won't say we have that solved, but it's one of the reasons why I welcome this pressure from the state.
And sometimes those paths are just not obvious. I think Debbie was talking to this also. I mean, look, the nursing students, they have a goal. The teacher education students, they're going in a certain direction. I took a group of first-year students a number of years ago to tour our Cleveland Federal Reserve Bank, which is very close to you at Cleveland State, and amazing institution. And while I was there, I ran into a former advisee of mine. I'm in the history department. And I did not know he graduated several years before. I did not know he was working there, and he just happened to be there. And we got into a conversation, and it was all about, yeah, the Federal Reserve has lots of jobs for history majors. And I don't think anybody in my department had thought about, like, hey, you should look at the job postings. You're about to graduate. There are things that are, not focused on necessarily being an economist or a banker, that would be needed at a place like the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. So building up those connections, I think, is also a really important part of the process.
Yeah, and Peter, I think in addition to those connections, it's the start of when that's happening. So about 8 years ago, we flipped our paradigm for career to be early and often, meaning let's get freshmen and sophomore students on an experience to let them test the waters. Kind of like, what Debbie was mentioning. We don't want them to be a junior or senior and find out that I absolutely do not like children and then have to pivot, right? So we're seeing now, after all that hard work, that we're having as many freshmen and sophomore students engaged in some career experience on parity with our juniors and seniors.
We're very focused on something similar, actually, here. All of our engineering students are taking this kind of multi-engineering disciplinary lab that kind of incorporates all these different aspects of electrical over here and mechanical over there. They work in groups and projects, and it helps some of them see, oh, this is the area I want to go in, and it helps others say, oh, I thought I wanted to be an engineer, but actually it turns out none of this is interesting to me. I want to go and do something else. And we're doing this in many of our most popular kind of major areas.
Peter, just wanted to echo your point earlier about had me thinking about alumni engagement. I mean, as we talk about scale, especially, I feel like the pressures are so multifaceted and rely on robust networks. I mean, and then John, coming back to your, I think your comment too around trying to find equity. I don't know, Georgetown had this kind of interesting thing, and again, very, very small school, but I think the experience came out of their Red House, where they were leveraging alumni networks in order to fashion postgraduate sort of something that seemed like a micro credential. In other words, if you had 20% of your class going to McKinsey, and then the same 20% were trying to figure out how to transition out of working for McKinsey after a year, there's an opportunity there. I think we have similar kinds of opportunities presented through alumni networking if we just have the right channels in order to get things back to a place where we have capacity to run those kinds of things. Again, we're like highly federated in a way that Georgetown is not, and so that becomes more challenging. But as we talk about from first year all the way to grad or post grad, those are ties I think that we sometimes have difficulty trying to make mesh over time.
I think as well that for a long time, even now, for a long time, being an undecided major was seen as a bad thing. And this transition from, using the word exploratory and identifying students as explorers along the path of different industries and different functions has been, I think, a really good initial step at showcasing that it's okay to not know exactly what you want to do on day one. And, we've certainly seen students who've benefited from that approach as opposed to pigeonholing them into, you're in this major, you should look at these 2 or 3 industries.
Hey, Alec, while you have the floor, why don't you say a little bit more about what Podium is doing to help folks in Ohio and elsewhere with this issue?
Yeah, sure, Steve. Thanks. And again, I really appreciate the invite here and the fact that you can bring these conversations together. I think they're so important. And we've been a partner of UERU's now for this is our first formal year, but we've loved getting to know you all. And I think by now you're starting to know Podium and the Global Career Accelerator, which is the program that we run across the country. We've run it with a number of universities in Ohio, but I will say that the folks on this call and others in the state have been by far the most forward-thinking in terms of integrating work-based learning, even prior to these recent bills. Our program allows students of all backgrounds, all majors, to be able to gain work-based learning as part of their undergraduate degree. We've had a ton of success at a national level, I think, at impacting students and giving them a seat at the table at places they wouldn't otherwise have access to, being able to spend time with L'Oreal and Nike and Intel. But I do think the next step of our evolution, and particularly working with our Ohio universities, is going to be how do we ensure that the cherry on top for those students is that they remain regionally relevant or relevant to that regional employment reality. Norm, I really like what you said earlier about reflection and this idea that yes, once I have exposure to a certain company, that's great. But what are those organizations that I should be thinking about both in state and in my region that might like to hear the fact that I've worked on a project for a week with L'Oreal? Who are those companies, Debbie, in Cleveland that might want to hear about that? So, we've been really excited to work with our Ohio-based schools on this project. And one of our goals over the next 12 months is to start to integrate more regional-based employers. And I'll also say that from a collaboration perspective, it's been great to see as a response to these bills that the universities in the state are wanting to be collaborative in bringing those companies to the table, but also in working together to impact students, because we do see a lot of students in Ohio who come from in-state and then want to remain in-state when they graduate. I think there's a role for us to play there.
I think we had 37 students this summer doing I'm trying to remember the name exactly what it was, the Podium, the Global Career Accelerator program. I think it was very successful.
Yeah, I think, again, for us, and we all hit on this, it's this idea that think students have a lot of options, and we start to think about now, how do we integrate these kind of experiences into coursework so you almost don't leave it to chance for students. So part of their academic journey is that they are going to be exploring different industries, different functions. And again, I think it's part of the ethos of the universities in Ohio that you'll have really embraced this idea, and that the students have been so successful in the program as well.
We do have a few questions which are appearing in the Q&A function. We appreciate folks for submitting those. Why don't we go to the first one? Katie Burr, I believe from UGA, if I'm not mistaken, writes, how are you assessing career readiness? Assessment question. In other words, what are the data or evidence? What data or evidence suggests that your initiatives are successful? Who would like to maybe address that? Oh, Norman?
I'll start by I don't have a perfect answer, and in some ways, this new push is making us ask that question. We have seen in areas that have a lot of internship and experiential learning opportunities, such as our College for Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences, where in some of their programs they really require 3 internships for students to graduate. They have taken this opportunity to say, let's assess and figure out if this is actually helping. Like, is this something that's benefiting students? Are they learning from these things? Are all internships and co-ops equal? So I can't say we've done that work, but we are realizing that would help a lot. An anecdote that's not from the undergraduate level, but our law school, I think I can share this. It has found that students who engage in a certain level of experiential learning classes, if they go above a certain number, their success on the bar exam drops precipitously. And there may be various kind of factors there, but that academic preparation is also important. And we've got to make sure that if they're engaging in some kind of experiential learning, that there is a reflection component, that there is some kind of meaning making happening. When I talk to employers, I think the litmus test is, can students talk about what they've learned from those experiences, especially when they've had a challenge, when they failed and picked themselves back up and figured out how to make something work. That's almost more important than the major is the ability of students to tell their story. And I think students often come into college with a mentality that they're going to check some boxes and get a great job. And we need to break them of that, because that is not what employers want. Somebody who just knows how to check boxes. They want somebody who can actually solve problems, who can fall down and get back up, and then tell that story persuasively.
Anyone else want to address that question?
I would just echo Norm's comments on the reflection piece. We all go through life and do different things, but if you don't stop to think about what you've done and what you've learned, then you just keep going, and it's hard to articulate that, right? So in processes around credit for prior learning, and processes around experiential learning, work-based learning, co-ops, internships, whatever the other words are that I'm missing, all of those things require some sort, from the student's perspective, like, this is what I did and this is what I learned and this is now what I know how to do, in an explicit kind of way. And I think that helps faculty also, when students come back and say, I did this thing and I learned all these things, and the faculty member will be, oh, great, you learned all those things. Maybe that counts for part of my class, or whatever the case might be. There's all kinds of stuff in that. But the other thing I think we should also be assessing is what's happening on if it's a co-op or internship or something outside the university, what's happening on the employer side? What's the employer's perception of the students and how they showed up? And then how can we incorporate, if there are things missing, that, all the students are going and they're always late, right? Then in our courses, we need to talk about the importance of being on time, because when you go to work, you have to be on time. That's a super simple example. But I think the assessment needs to be both the students' learning as well as the employer's experience with our students.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just will add, because I mentioned we've built this into at least a partial way to satisfy gen ed requirements. It's part of our overall general education assessment. And so we do have students who are doing those reflections as part of their internships to kind of submit the materials that get approved. It's not reaching every student who's satisfying this because of the way it's been set up. But they're kind of different ways that we work on assessment. We have surveys, we have other things like that.
Well, why don't we go to our next question in the Q&A? Andrew Hippisley from the University of Texas at Arlington asks, is there pressure to tell students how a major relates to careers based on studies such as Georgetown's, Center for Education and Workforce, regular studies that they do on the major payoff? Any pressures on the major selection process?
Okay.
Steve, yeah, I don't think we have a pressure as much as maybe from a marketing standpoint. And what I mean by that is ahead of students applying, receiving admission, and then showing up, really using some of our web-based tools to show what they could do with a major. And it really speaks to, the parent family piece, right? Getting that buy-in from mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunt and uncle, whomever that is. So they're armed with the student is armed with some knowledge about what they might do as a major leading to a career. But I think, as we all know, there are so many different pathways now. It could be like a lattice instead of a ladder. So on the front end, I think some of that work, we feel the pressure internally to do as we're recruiting students and families.
Yeah, I'll just add, like I said before, so many of our students have career paths kind of laid out for them. Coming from history, right? We do have students who come in who are only doing history, and not like the student I met with before this session, who's a history major, who's also pre-med. So he's doing fine. But we have students who are not sure what they want to do. They're interested in humanities or arts or some social science fields, and they don't have an obvious career path laid out for them. We try to work with those students, whether it's with your academic advisor, our professional advisors, the career center, to kind of, as long as they're thinking about what they want to do. And that's kind of my philosophy. Students need to study what they're interested in, and things will eventually work out most of the time, hopefully. But they need to just think consciously thoughtfully, well, what do you want to do once you're out of here? What kinds of connections, what kind of opportunities do you want to seize while you're a student? Are you thinking about a graduate program? Are you thinking about, particular job opportunities? What are the choices you want to make that will make that history degree longer term worthwhile, not just intellectually worthwhile, which I of course think it is, but professionally worthwhile in the long term.
Steve,
Yeah.
can I add something here very briefly?
Yes,
This is
please.
Maria Galistampino from UMiami, because I can never be quiet. So I just wanted to follow up on what Peter was saying. I am also an unrepentant humanist. I think we actually have an opportunity to educate families because of what's happening before our very eyes with computer science majors who 3 years ago, we couldn't have enough, and now they are now finding jobs. And and again, as I mentioned in the chat, we're talking careers, not first jobs, right? So you need to be prepared to pivot, because the world is going to pivot around us, and we have a lot of people who thought that we're going to fit in a certain mold, and now the mold doesn't exist anymore. So that's it. We have an opportunity.
Yeah, we have a lot of unrepentant humanists in URU. I just think we do. I noticed that. We have a
Steve,
great
if I could just add there as well. I think you're absolutely right there, Maria. I think so many students, I'm a first-gen student, but so many students go into college knowing, frankly, like 3 jobs, right? What their parents did and maybe what a influential aunt or uncle or neighbor did. And I think we owe it to them to be able to give them an opportunity to be able to explore and understand, what else is out there. We have found a ton of success in when we create immersive projects with companies, we actually put it back on the company and we say, hey, we'd like you to bring in young professionals to engage with our students who perhaps did meander around a little bit, who came from those backgrounds that you wouldn't think of necessarily. And case in point, we just built a project with L'Oreal, and their head of product was a Spanish major, for example. So we are really trying to root out those people those young professionals at those companies, to kind of really showcase those to students, because I think that is one of the ways in which you can start to break these preconceptions.
I just want to assure Alexa and David that we're going to get to your questions, but I see Sarah Pagioni has her hand up from Ohio University. So Sarah, when you want to jump in there, are you an unrepentant humanist as well? Is that what's?
I'm a social scientist, actually,
what I
so
thought.
not quite, but not there either.
Of course.
But certainly, one of the things that we're trying to do that I think can help address this question is we're working with our general education courses to highlight the NACE competencies in those courses, and also have students reflect on what they're learning in those courses, because we know a lot of students are coming to us, I will say weakly decided, as opposed to deciding in some cases. And so when those students have those general education courses, maybe it's more visible to them and potentially their families about what they're getting in those general education courses. That might help them understand there are other options out there, so that they can study the thing they're really passionate about, but also explore a variety of careers that they're actually building skills for. So I really feel like there's an opportunity with general education to work with our faculty partners to say, you're already doing this. How do we make it more visible to the students in the class so that they understand what they're getting out of it? I mean, I've talked to students who've done public speaking and don't reflect on it as a career-related skill, when obviously you're building some competencies there. So I think that reflection for us is key, and getting it early in general education will also help students, I think, find paths, perhaps.
Yeah,
Thank you, Sarah. Great to see you. Please, others jump in.
Sarah, I love that idea, and we're trying to work on something similar here at Kent State, but as you know, it's not an easy task. The other thing that we did have some really great traction with and continue is educating our student employment supervisors about the competencies, and then how they can have those conversations with the students they're supervising about the thing that they're doing daily in that campus job, what competency or competencies they can now articulate on their resume.
You know what, John, we're doing something very similar. We have NACE career competencies with our student employment. So we actually have modules built in so that they can reflect on that and think about those folks who are working on campus, what they're actually building towards what's next. Because the number of students I see who kind of sell themselves short when they write their first initial resume and aren't really thinking about how to articulate those great experiences to potential employers, it's a fair amount. We're not helping them connect the dots quite enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, the frustrating thing as well, I spend half my time working with employers on the flip side, and there has, from somewhere, I think this rumor has started that employers are, not looking to recruit from all majors and all backgrounds. And the reality is the opposite is true. But they just say, if I roll up to a careers fair on campus, the first 100 students in line are those who know, what they want to do. They've been prepped to come to this careers fair. They've got that long resume already. How do we meet the next 100 students? And so that's been a really interesting conversation, understanding like, how do you tease that out? How do you ensure that students understand, okay, if I want to go work somewhere like Intel, there's an opportunity for me outside of just making microchips, right? And so, again, I think we can be having students think about that and understand what are the vast range of opportunities available at some of these great places.
Why don't we address Alexa Sand's question? She's at Utah State University and asked about how you count the undergraduate research side of things when you're thinking about professional, career readiness. Specifically, she's thinking about, the research assistants in the lab and, students who are in REUs, et cetera, et cetera. What are you doing with that population?
Counting in terms of satisfying requirements, or counting towards, does it fall under the work-related development, something else?
Alexa, you can unmute if you want and jump in and clarify. Could be both.
I'm going to say,
You go ahead.
in terms of our, we have lots of students who do research, and it's not typically something that accounts for credit, although sometimes it does. It depends on kind of the circumstance of the student. This is where I think I try to push us to avoid the trap of making everything worthwhile count for something. Right? There are just good things students can do, and they can always just put it on their CV or their resume and promote it and talk about it, write an essay about it, talk about it in their interviews, learn from it. So it's, we had discussed whether the research should fall under this local and global engagement requirement as well, and ultimately decided mostly no, but sometimes maybe yes. And it's like, well, just let them do research. It's a good thing. They want to do it. We make lots of opportunities available for them. Not everything has to count for something, but other places may have different experiences.
I would just add on this note, and I've been saying, well, it's a great opportunity to have the politicians kind of push on us in this way, and I do think that's true. We also sometimes need to push back, because I think partly what this workforce development kind of push is about is somehow implying that we haven't been preparing students quite right for careers. And the fact is, they still want to hire our students. They still want to hire, college graduates. And the idea that we have to sort of tie everything to careers, I think, starts to feed into that narrative. I mean, that somehow we haven't been doing it right before. I think often when I mentioned earlier that, we are trying to track better what a lot of our students do, but we're not going to require a certain type of internship or co-op in every program, because we don't think one size fits all or that it's always appropriate. So part of what we have to do is tell our story better, right? We don't have dissatisfied alums, right? We've got a lot of people who value, and again, the employers are hiring college graduates. They're not saying like, well, they don't know enough, or they're not really. Now, there are cases where we could do a little better for sure, and we're always willing to work on that, but it's not, I think the simplified narrative is not one we want to reinforce. So there are opportunities here push back is one way to put it, but just tell our stories a little more effectively. As Maria said, there's a lot in the chat. There is a lot of good data about the value of a college degree. It's still not easy to tell that story, and I think we need to tell it in ways that have punch to it, and bumper sticker punch, unfortunately, because that's a culture that we live in, not just in data.
About 5 minutes and 2 questions in the Q&A. I wonder if we could answer them quickly before we conclude our town hall today. David Vaughn at Clemson, he asks, beyond experiential learning, reflection component, how are you working with students to document their experience? It kind of goes to what Peter was talking about, via their CV or online resume, or maybe even using LinkedIn, other forms of documenting these experiences.
So as we expand in co-op, we're essentially using course-based structures that have built into them reflection and that kind of documentation. So they're happening both as courses, so they tend to be transcripted experiences, and there's a co-curricular function there that also is meant to engage the student in that same level of reflection and capacity driving. Again, I mean, just coming back to our issues at scale, though, I mean, that tends to happen in somewhat more traditional avenues, I think, than it does some of the truly like embedded career education exploration. So,
yeah, I'm similar. I mean, our co-ops and our practicums are transcripted, and internships are not. Students work with our career center or various program offices to learn how to promote what they're doing, how to document it. I don't have that much to add. CVs, resumes, that's kind of part of the overall package.
Well, I'll just give another shout out. People have been mentioning the Gen Ed, and we revised our Gen Ed, and I can brag about this because I didn't do it. I was just on the sidelines for this part, but and what students had kept telling us is it just didn't cohere. It felt like a checklist of requirements. So we built a reflection component where they take a 1 credit hour, kind of, we call it a launch seminar, and then a 1 credit hour reflection seminar, usually in their junior year. And they have a cloud-based portfolio system. We use PebblePad for that, where they can upload artifacts of all different kinds from their classes and have these kind of worksheets to help reflect on them. And we teach them how to put those things into some kind of, make meaning from them in a way that where they can share the story. And then we have students, starting to create. It's only in its 4th year now, so we're just seeing graduates starting to, or seniors starting to put together their kind of end product, but create an entire portfolio where they can talk about, what kind of student they are, what things that they've experienced. As someone in the chat mentioned, maybe the Epic of Gilgamesh was really important to them along the way, even if they're pre-med, and that's going to distinguish them because they can talk about why or how, their bedside manner is better because of Gilgamesh. Who knows? I don't know. I'm just making that up. But I just want students to be more creative and have more opportunities to reflect on their experience.
That Norman relates to the question Laura Palms puts in our Q&A, and she's from George Mason University, if I'm not mistaken, how to get faculty to build career-related outcomes into gen ed courses. Do you want to address that since you're doing it?
Well, the way we've approached faculty about this is you don't necessarily need Bureau of Labor Department statistics, right? Where you don't, like, that stuff doesn't necessarily resonate with people. And you could talk about transferable skills. At one point, I know a lot of us were thinking about that, like what can you put on a resume from a class in X, Y, or Z subject. I think it's more about the experiences, the stories that a student can tell. I have a nephew who graduated with a math major, and he asked me afterward, "Hey, can you help me with my resume?" And I said, "Okay, cool. Tell me about why you're a math major. Like, what excited you?" And he thought for a minute, he starts listing the classes that he took. That's the problem, right? I don't think we need more lists or more, even if it's transcriptable things. I think we need students to be able to tell their own stories and say what differentiates them. What did they experience? How did they put it together in their own way? And I'm talking too much. I'll shut up on this one, but I've taught Faulkner a lot. And I've often said to my students, almost none of you are going to have a future employer who cares whether you understood Faulkner, but they're really going to care whether you are able to juggle all the different requirements of your classes, learn hard things that made you step out of your comfort zone, which often is Faulkner. I mean, that's the story we want students to be able to tell. So I don't know if that helps, but.
Well, we just have a minute, so let me throw it to you, Aled, for a last comment from the podium perspective. We're grateful for your partnership. Thanks for helping us pull this town hall together and so many other things.
Yes, Steve, I appreciate it. I appreciate all the panelists here. This has been fantastic. And again, really appreciate the collaborative approach to how we're thinking about this, both in the state of Ohio and further afield. One quick update from our side, actually something exciting that has linked to a lot of the things we talked about today. And that is that we are actually piloting a new program in the spring with a group of 8 schools called our Career Discovery Experience. And the concept behind that is that we can bring experiential learning, high impact practice opportunities earlier into the degree, so that instead of thinking about this of how does a student choose a job or a career, how they utilize engaging in immersive projects to choose a major. So thinking about that freshman and sophomore experience in particular. So we're really grateful to our pilot partners for that, and we'll have more to report back on here as that spring program kicks off. I see John and Debbie here in particular who are part of that pilot project, but we're just really excited. We've learned so much from this partnership with UERU. We continue to learn every time we engage with you all. So Steve, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to all your colleagues. I think that early and often phrase, I think John used it. Maybe it was Debbie. I thought that was a great way of thinking about early and often to focus on this. So we're grateful to Podium, to all our panelists, of course, to everyone who's joined this town hall and posted in our chat. A lot of great documents and comments, and thanks to all of you who posed questions. know that we'll have recorded this. We'll go through and clean up the transcript, post it at our website, let everyone know it's available. So please feel free to share this with colleagues at your campus or elsewhere who you think may have an interest in what has been shared today. Again, many thanks to everyone, but goodbye for now. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Steve.